opportunity to try to understand morality, science, and spirituality. First of all, what they need in themselves and in their interrelationship. Now, when we speak about morality, usually we have a conventional view of morality. A society considers certain things as acceptable or not acceptable, and that becomes the moral standard of the society. Look, for example, gender relationships. Now, in what way men and women would relate to themselves, whether intimate relationship between men and women is allowed or not. Now, all these are part of a socially accepted norms of a society. But we can beyond socially accepted norms, there is the question of dignity, the dignity of relationships. For example, now you look at some society like contemporary Afghan society, which is controlled by the Taliban. And their gender relationship is now being strictly monitored. But even in many Islamic societies, you look at the Mughal empires, and there was a lot of flexibility in gender relationships. And the courtesans, and they were knowledgeable people, they were trained in songs and music. And so it was accepted a more flexible relationship between men and women was accepted even in Islamic society. And but now in contemporary Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, it is different. Look at contemporary Western society or contemporary American society, where gender relationship is very flexible. That means that if one man and one woman, they want to be intimate, there is not a lot of sociological barrier for that. But still, what is the moral consideration? According to Luce Irigaray is a deep women philosopher from France. She makes a very interesting comment about gender relationships. She says that in France, women are liberated and they have the choice for intimate relationships, for free sexual relationships. But women seem not to have as much dignity of their body and soul as women in India have. She has visited India. And I was reading Pulam Devi, I think just 2 weeks ago when I was visiting IIT Mumbai, and I was reading a very deep reflection on Pulam Devi, where Pulam Devi is making a statement, and you know her story, how she was given into marriage to an elderly person at a young age. And Pulam Devi makes this comment that Western women are used and thrown like a usable item. So I'm using all this example just to bring us the point that when we talk about morality, there is a conventional morality, and that is one side of the story. The other side of the story at the same time is post-conventional morality. That means a society takes something for granted, but that is not the only moral yardstick. What the society takes for granted, we have to think with and beyond it. Remember what Lord Jesus Christ told. In the Bible, the story goes that when a woman, there was a woman on the road and she was alleged to be, involved in adultery, and according to the Judaic law, and that law still continues in Taliban-controlled Afghanistan, that you pick up a stone and you throw it, and you have to stone this woman to death. And Lord Jesus Christ said, okay, one who has never committed in sin, let him pick up the first stone. So that morality is a post-conventional morality. And this morning also in the train or in Rabindra Sadan, I was reading a book of Chittavhar where he is discussing the question of ethics, morality, and he is also pointing to the same direction. How when we consider morality, not just socially accept norm and regulation, that is only yardstick, we would have to ask about our moral conscience, about the issue of dignity. So therefore, in thinking about morality, though we live in a world of conventional morality, but living in the world of conventional morality, moral development challenges us to move from the conventional to the post-conventional. So the post-conventional moral development is a very important journey. For example, in psychology, in talking about psychology of moral development, so in talking about psychology of moral development, Lawrence Kolmor speaks about Lawrence, just 1 minute. I'm just crossing the road. Bear with me. So, Lawrence Kolmor talks about post-conventional moral development. You remember that with Jean Piaget, Jean Piaget talks about stages of moral development, stages of child development. And according to conventional idea of child development, we think that child development stops at a particular year. For example, once you become an adult, then our developmental logics end. But there is an alternative idea of development, for example, Erik Erikson and others, who are challenging us that our development continues all throughout life. So therefore, even if at an early stage of childhood, we are kind of socialized into conventional morality, but when we grow, when we develop, when we look around, when we visit around the world, anthropologically, culturally, through literature, through our own imagination, we can make a distinction between conventional morality and universal morality. So therefore, when we are talking about morality, there is a simultaneous existence of the morality of the society that we have been raised, as well as universal morality. Even the morality that we live with has a dimension of universal morality. Here we may know that universal morality has existed throughout human history. All traditions have a dimension of universal morality. For example, in Indian tradition, we have a dimension of universal morality. Therefore, dharma as universal morality is not just limited to a particular group morality. With and beyond the group morality, there is a universal morality. And what is that universal morality? That universal morality is non-harm. That means we must not harm anybody. It is also called ahimsa. Ahimsa, no harm, non-violence. This is universal morality because it helps us to grow. So therefore, rethinking and transforming morality, at this, when we are discussing morality, we have to understand the distinction between conventional morality and post-conventional morality. As I mentioned, the idea of the post-conventional moral development has been presented by Lawrence Kohlberg, a very thoughtful psychologist, and Jürgen Habermas, great sociologist and philosopher. He built upon the idea of post-conventional moral development and he brought it to sociological reasoning. Therefore, in Habermas, his idea of morality always has a post-conventional dimension. In his book, Moral Consciousness and Communicative Action, Habermas challenges us to understand two things. He is saying that the taken for granted norm of a society can be a kind of a norm which does not understand the distinction between justice and injustice. For example, as I gave you the idea that if we treat women badly, that is injustice. And even if we have our patriarchal, even if we live patriarchal, that is moral. Habermas discusses moral consciousness as having that gaze, that ability to live with a moral sensitivity which respects the sense of dignity and justice. So this is about post-conventional morality. And if we look at theories of morality, for example, the great American philosopher John Dewey. John Dewey also challenges us to understand this understanding of morality, that when we talk of morality, we just do not have to talk about social morality, but morality which respects the dignity of individuals. Morality which helps us to blossom both our individual life. So this challenge of post-conventional morality with morality, I invite you to now come to science. Now science also, there is something called the normal science. For example, when Newton was alive and Newtonian mechanics was accepted, that this is the accepted way of understanding reality. But when quantum mechanics came, then Newtonian mechanics, then it became part of a larger sense of reality. Because Newtonian mechanics, law of gravity and subject-object relationships holds at a particular level. But in the quantum world, we look at that the quantum world, the distinction between wave and particle is porous, as Stephen Hawking has shown us. So dear friends, I invite us to think about the distinction between normal science and post-normal science. And that the distinction between normal science and post-normal science is an evolving distinction. Like when the quantum mechanics came, the normal science of Newtonian mechanics, it became part of a larger interconnected reality and truth. Similarly, today, now even the quantum world is being, at the front of new kinds of development. Many new developments are coming. So therefore, the conventional morality and post-conventional morality, similarly with science, we would have to open ourselves always to post-normal science. And that post-normal science opens up new kind of possibilities. For example, today, there's a lot of interesting connection between science and spirituality, between mind and spirit, matter and spirit, intuition and nature. All these things are opening up science to new realms of realization. So, this is post-normal and normal science. Now, with science also, there is another kind of development that we need to take note of. You know, the philosophy of science was deeply That's by positivism. And positivism in sociology, in fact, the founder of our field, Saint Simon, he has really cultivated the path of positivism, and it was a very important development. But positivism also, it got frozen. It had a view of science and the worship science. It worshipped science. It worshipped science in such a way that slowly science became an end in itself. Okay, and it lost ethical considerations, the relationship between ends and means, and therefore, the link between science and violence, science and technology, all these issues. So as a result, there have been very important movement called post-positivist movement. And post-positivist movement, it opens up the logic of positivism and along many directions. For example, R. Sundararajan, in his very important work, Beyond the Crisis of European Sciences Towards New Beginnings, Sundararajan speaks about three terms. One is the linguistic term, the other is the feminist term, and the third is the ecological term. He's saying that all this is being transformed. So that gender question is being asked in science. Gender question is really opening up the issue of gender justice in science, and how the men-women relationships and even the sort of reproductive biology,
I think we have lost connection. Meanwhile, we can invite Professor Gyangului to please share some of your thoughts. Once we get the connection, we'll ask you to mute, and then we'll invite Ananta. So, Professor Gyan, over to you.
I had unfortunately some problems with my connection self, and therefore I could not.
Your connection is perfect. You are very loud
yes,
and
now,
audible.
Yes, but I could not follow very much the audio of Professor Giri. Therefore, I could not comment so much, except for if I have correctly understood, but I am not sure, when he said that Ahimsa is the new non-conventional ethics, if I have correctly understood, because the words came a little bit disturbed. And well, yes, of course, I would say yes, Ahimsa can be the new non-conventional conception of morality. Of course, this presupposes also a new politics of the states. That is, I think that Ahimsa can be seen as a new form of morality for the individuals. Yes, but I think that the problem here is rather the question of the countries. That is, we have anyway countries with which make huge expenses in weapons, and therefore here is the problem, is my opinion. That is, to affirm aims as a new non-conventional morality is rather comprehensible, of course, for the individuals, but I see a great problem on the level of the countries. That is,
Yes,
unfortunately, I'm
I
not
think we
sure.
have.
Huh?
Yes,
Yes,
thank you.
yes, thank
Uh,
you.
uh, I think Professor Giri has just joined, so we can invite him to complete his lecture. Yes, Ananta bhai.
Yes. So you open up my video, please. So now, am I audible?
Yes,
Okay. So now this post-positivist, on a post-positivist development and post-conventional morality. Now let us look at the ecological term. Now, conventional positivism, for example, positive science has not been really associated with nature because it continues the divide between man and nature, society and nature. Therefore, the ecological way also is a way of moving towards wholeness. Now, in morality also, we are continuously challenged that how do we realize the sense of the whole? We have fragments, but we have a whole, and that whole is a moving whole. It is not that this is whole is an absolutist whole. In English language, there is two words. One is HOLE and WHOLE. So our whole, we are in terms of morality and science, we are living in many holes, HOLE. Now, the challenge is that how continuous development for evolutionary realization. So this is the kind of link between science and morality. But the other question about science and morality is, as I have just hinted at, that conventional science has not been because the distinction between science and technology. This is a point that Professor J.P.S. Ubroi, who is a very thoughtful sociologist of science, he has written an important book called Science and Culture. He says that science takes credit for all the good things that it talks about. But when technology creates bomb, it says that the mistakes, the moral problem lies with technology. In a sense of wholeness, Professor Ubroi challenges us that this is a really moral blindness. You cannot blame the politicians and the technologies, and you can just leave science untouched. We also have to be a moral critic of science. And in his many work, beginning with science and culture, when he's discussing about positivism, he's also discussing another part of science called semiology. And it's the study of symbols, science of symbols. And he builds upon the work of Goethe and how Goethe's work, his work on plants, metamorphosis of plants with eyes. It's really looking at the symbol and its wholeness, it constitutes another method of science. So, therefore, morality and science, via the challenge of the post-conventional moral development and the challenge of post-positive science, comes to how do we really embrace the challenge of moral questions in both our society and science. And it also brings the question of men, ends, and means and ends. Now, means and ends, as you know, They are related with each other, and they cannot be totally separated. And Gandhi here challenges us that means is very important. But even if we may not always be able to live up to Gandhian, challenge, Gandhian horizon, Gandhian ground, but we can never dissociate the link between means and end. So therefore, in science also, how do we always remember this relationship between means and end? Okay, sometimes end may be preferred, sometimes means, but the relationship always has to be kept in mind. And modern science, contemporary science is forgetting that. Therefore, the whole challenge of moral development is to bring the question of means and ends to science. Now let us bring the spiritual here. Now the spiritual also, there is a relationship between science and spirituality. As I have hinted at, when science opens up itself to many layers of reality, for example, mind and beyond mind, intuition, Gnostic knowledge, in all these processes, spirituality very important. But spirituality is practice, for example. Now, what is spirituality? Spirituality could be understood as a continuous movement for realization of beauty, dignity, and dialogue in self, culture, and society. Now, as scientists, we need to embody practical spirituality. Another dimension of spirituality is ahimsa, no harm. And that is very important for science. Another dimension of spirituality is always remember the challenge of well-being of all, even if we live with our many limits and limitations. But the well-being of all is always a challenge for us. And the spiritual is continuously concerned with the well-being of all, with and beyond religion. So there is a distinction between religion and spirituality. There is also a distinction between morality and spirituality, because conventional morality becomes a morality of whole, H-O-L-E, but spirituality opens up this morality of the whole and its blindness to many ways of life. So therefore, dear friends, let us then rethink morality, rethink science, and then establish a new relationship between science and morality. Similarly, let us have understand the relationship between morality, science, and spirituality. When we come to spirituality also, there is the challenge of transformation. Because when we talk about the spiritual, usually we have an individualistic view of spirituality. And for example, our idea of moksha, salvation, that salvation is limited to individual life. But in Indian tradition, we also have the notion of collective moksha, the idea of the bodhisattva. In bodhisattva, that nobody is free unless all are free. Therefore, one way to read spirituality is simultaneously focus on the Atman and the society. And now that spirituality is also confronted with the embrace of all life. For example, how do you have spiritual relationship with plants, animals, non-human animals, with stars, sky? So it is really a web of relationship that we would have to cultivate. So therefore, we would have to rethink morality, science, and spirituality in themselves. For example, spirituality, how do we make it practical spirituality? I have edited 2 volumes on practical spirituality and human development. I have also edited 2 volumes on pragmatism, spirituality, society. The great sociologist Robert Wuthnow wrote a very important book called Creative Spirituality almost 20 years ago or 25 years ago, in which he is discussing how spirituality today is getting manifested in many creative works like the work of the artists. And So art becomes very important. Similarly, art, how do we link art and morality? Because art and morality would open up a command view of morality to a morality as really something that is with us, as well as it is creatively nurturing. It is not just a commandment view of morality, but it is a sutra view of morality. For example, in some traditions, like the biblical tradition, we have the notion of the commandment, 10 commandments. But these commandments are really invitation for us to establish threads. In Indian tradition, we have a notion of morality as sutra, you know. So what is sutra is, it is an aphorism, you know, it is an invitation, but sutra is also, we put the threads among each other. So therefore, dear friends, let us have a sutra. You know, how do we really have a sutra, you know, a way in which we can rethink morality, science, and spirituality, and then weave threads among themselves, science and morality, morality and science, science and spirituality, morality and spirituality. So on this New Year day, therefore, let us open ourselves to be a garlanders, to be making of the garlands, you know, and let us make with the threads of science, morality, and spirituality together, and weave a thread of blossoming of life, a flower, a garden that would help us to grow and confront the contemporary challenges of the lack of relationship between them, or being imprisoned in conventional morality and conventional science and conventional spirituality, and make move from the conventional to the post-conventional in a spirit of evolutionary transformation of consciousness, or many evolutionary adventures in self, science, culture, and spirituality. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Professor Giri. It was really very insightful and very deep presentation. Dear and respected friend, now it's time for intervention. You can share your thoughts and comments. Please indicate me in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask or share some of your thoughts. Maybe we can invite Dr. Gyan Goloi. Yes, Minati Pradhan ji.
Hello. Yeah. Hope I'm audible.
Yes, yes, you're audible.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year to everyone. Telling frankly, I could not hear most of the things. I know it was the last only could hear some of the things. But in my limited knowledge, pardon me if I'm asking something, I don't know, very relatable or not. You know, kartavya, when you say it is a duty, the duty, we do our job for living, but kartavya duty is for all of us to do, you know, towards our body, mind, soul, for family, for community, for country, for and I feel that morality is, as Ananta bhai also mentioned, it is no movable entity like this thing. So he related many things about non-violent well-being of all, then religion, spiritualism, spirituality and mortality. How do what is the relationship between the morality and our duty? I mean, I just want to know about it. Thank you.
Hello, Minati. What is the relationship between, what did you say?
Morality and duty, kartabya. I just.
Morality and duty. Na? Okay. This is your question, please. Is this okay?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And we would assemble a few more questions together. Okay, maybe I can begin with this question quickly. So thank you, Minati. Now, duty is many-sided. Now, duty has a dimension in which that it touches what is expected of all of us. But duty also can be imprisoned in a command-driven structure, like, in our family, we look at the notion of kartabya. But when we look at kartabya or duty, it is mostly, in a social structure, it is presented in a hierarchical way. For example, the kartabya of women is much more talked about than the kartabya of men, or the kartabya of children is much more talked about than the kartabya of parents. So duty, though at the level of idea, it has, a certain kind of, universality. But in its social manifestation, especially in Indian society or any hierarchical society, duty is not isolated from the hierarchical logic of the society. And therefore, when Gandhi said, for example, it is I do not know any right but duty, he was referring to a higher morality, but the social structure does not embody that. So in contemporary India, as you know, our present ruling government is talking about duty, fundamental duties. But what we see that this kind of sloganeering of duty is accompanied by destruction of rights. Nobody is talking about rights, even labor rights and human rights. And anybody who is talking about human rights, some of them are in prison. So duty discourse, we would have to look at it in its sociological context. Therefore, duty, when it is part of a hierarchical morality, it is very much from the top to the bottom. But morality has a dimension of challenging that, because the morality as universal consciousness, as universal moral consciousness, it would challenge that, okay, when we are talking about duty, let us also talk about the duty of all of us. And all of us have a duty to also give rights to each other, protect each other's rights, not violate each other's rights. We can Minati.
Thank you, Ananta. Finally, I have reached my home, and it was really very good session. But first, I want to talk about the whole problem of science, and we must think in the way like the problem in the philosophy of science is meaning, like economics, political science, or other social sciences imitate natural science. or what we know in terms of the whole method of positivism. But the differences between natural objects and human beings, we can use information to adapt, or for that matter, adjust to ongoing concepts and language. Does not, however, get discussed. Natural objects like a sky, like ocean, they cannot internalize or accommodate human concepts like truth, for that matter, like logic, for that matter. So I'm just problematizing the concept of science, and we need to problematize if we really want to understand the philosophy of science in terms of its meaning. And then we can bring out the idea of Wittgenstein's leading idea in Trescotus, was that proposition, that is a statement asserting facts, and we can see there also in Noam Chomsky's understanding of grammar and reality. So that is something which is very important. Then when it comes to the question of morality, how morality and legislation is related. Many laws are based on our moral rules. Even rights are considered to be rules. So the main principles of morality, like rights, like care, fairness, even love, are coded in judicial and law enforcement, produces the status. However, the moral reasoning is considered to be practical in that sense. So maybe you can help us to understand the very potential relationship between legislature and morality in today's context, and how truth, facts, and goodness work together. Because when we understand this concept with Horkheimer's critique of Kant over the assumption that good brought happiness, in that sense, that logic, it is very difficult to practice in any disciplinary sense, for that matter. And and also not the very relationship between morality and legislation, but how morality and culture are related. So these are my submission about the relationship. But when it comes to the practice of science, it is very difficult to understand religion and evolution together, because it has two different contexts. But how we can bring all this interrelatedness of the concept in order to visualize a universal understanding of reality. Yes. Thank you. You are muted.
Between science and social science, human science, natural science. Now, there is some distinction, but today Now, we are challenged to simultaneously engage ourselves, human science, social science, natural science. And just 2 weeks ago, a teacher of mine, Professor Annapurna Pandey from UC system, UC Santa Cruz, in a conference on environment, she presented a book called How Forests Think. And I think in our dialogue, one Sabyasachi was also mentioning that, Professor Sabyasachi, how forests think. Therefore, our view of nature is also changing. It is not that forests are also unthinking beings, there is a thought dimension to forest. So that way, so our conventional idea of matter and spirit is changing. So today we need to simultaneously engage ourselves with man, human, society, and nature, and have a kind of science which can touch each one of them and without being imprisoned in a kind of modernistic positivism. And here, the challenge is really to cultivate a path of science understood very broadly. In Indian tradition, the notion of Vigyan, for example, Gyan, Vigyan, or Atma Gyan. Now, Vinoba Bhave, he has a book called Vigyan or Atma Gyan. So, how do we have a Gyan, Vigyan, and Atma Gyan, which is simultaneously related to the human, the societal, and nature, with its specificity also? And once we free ourselves from this kind of dichotomy, many new energies are possible. It is in that spirit, Jürgen Habermas, he spoke a long time ago. He said, today we need a philosophy of science which is not scientistic. And in the same way, in open the social sciences, Ilya Prigogine, Immanuel Wallerstein, and Michael Rolf Trio, my teacher from Johns Hopkins University. And what they are saying in the book Open the Social Sciences is that today we would have to have much more integration of the social science and natural science. How it is going to happen? All of us, we need to practice both natural science and social science. Even if I am not a student of natural science, but I would have to open myself to new developments so that I'm not totally ignorant, or I just do not say that the distinction between natural science and social science. So we would have to find new ways of engaging with the science of the human, Atma-Gyan, science of society, the social science, and the science of nature, as natural science. Then coming to the issue of law and morality, that's very interesting. Now, again, Habermas, building on Kant, his book Between Fact and Norms, towards a discourse theory of law and democracy, he gives some ideas. There is a relationship between law and morality. But again, that both law and morality can be conventional law as well as conventional morality. There was a very important critical legal studies movement, which was inspired by the great critical legal scholar and activist named Roberto M. Unger, who came from Brazil, and he became a professor at a very young age at Harvard. He has written many books, one of which called False Necessity, Anti-Necessitarian Social Theory in the Service of Radical Democracy. In this work, Unger, who later on became a minister in Lula's cabinet, I think President Lula in Brazil is just assuming charge, taking the reins from Bolsonaro, who destroyed many things, both law and nature. So Unger said that we must have a law to break law. And it is the spirit of Satyagraha, for example. Now, the tradition of Satyagraha, right from Henry David Thoreau to Gandhi, it says that when the conventional law and morality, they justify slavery, we would have to oppose that. So therefore, while talking about law and morality again, we would have to ask the question whether it is conventional, and as conventional law and morality, whether they support human dignity or not. And then the question of truth and goodness also comes, as you have pointed out. And then, the truth question and the goodness question and the right. And in critical theory, now there is a priority of right over good. That it is right, R-I-G-H-T, and justice, which is important, and good in that tradition. For example, both John Rawls and Habermas, they say that the notion of the good can be, specific to a particular cultural group. We might think that it is good to have women work at home all the time, the notion of a good society in a quote unquote in a traditional society, but in a contemporary Western society, it is good that women come out and work. So taking that relativity question into mind, that both Rawls and Habermas has given the priority of justice over right, or priority of right over good. But again, the challenge is in the question of science, we have to simultaneously attend to human science, natural science, and social science. Similarly, we have to simultaneously activate truth, good, and truth, good, and rights together.
Thank you, Ananta. Now we can invite
May I
Dr.
ask a
Gyan.
question? No.
Yes, please.
Sure.
Please.
I wanted to thank you very much for your presentation. I found it really energizing, and especially because you were riding in a rickshaw at the beginning, which is an adventure for me. But I want to ask a question, and maybe this is just my attempt to put what you said into the context that I find myself in. So right now in North America and Canada, where I am, there is almost complete acceptance of the American version of what's happening in Ukraine. No one is questioning why we are fighting a war, why we're spending billions on arms and weapons in the middle of a climate crisis. And if you raise those questions, if you point to an unconventional morality and say, these are people too, why am I killing them? Why am I feeding into that? You're completely ostracized or put aside. So there's no connection, or very difficult to make a connection between the unconventional morality that you may feel and Satyagraph, or a politics of opposition to that. So that's the major part of the context. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to how we as individuals, if we move into an unconventional morality, how we can connect with others in order to do the Satyagraha that Gandhiji wanted and envisioned. Thank you.
Please unmute yourself, Ananta bhai. It is not audible.
I can't hear you, Ananta.
Yes. Yes, now I am unmuted, please. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, so thank you, Paul Bhai, and my heartiest greetings to you from Kolkata on this New Year's Day, and we are very enriched by your presence. And it is a very profound question, yes. So this questioning is very important. And now the war in the war, the Ukraine and Russia. To begin with, it is Russian invasion of Ukraine. And at the same time, once the war had started, and there is the Russian invasion of Ukraine is also not isolated from the earlier geopolitical conflict. And once the war has begun, then the challenge is to move towards peace and not to build the war machine. And therefore, the critique of war, it is very important. It is very important. So we would have to create a peace movement. And therefore, again, the critique of military-industrial complex. And here I am reminded of a very profound point that my friend Carlos, who is a vice president of the Club of Rome, he told me that while the Europe is saying that, that it is the Ukraine is ours, but Carlos say Russia is also ours. It is in that sense that, okay, it is terrible that the invasion has begun, but it is a kind of, it has been started by a geopolitical killing machine. But some people in Russia are opposing it, though their voice is muted. Therefore, in a spirit of peace, how do we move towards peace? And therefore, the opposition that you are talking, the opposition that is coming up, it is very important to build this opposition and really to bring the geopolitical entanglement from both the sides. And how do we, once we are in a stalemate, and instead of feeding the war machine, how do we move towards peace? That is the great challenge. And here Satyagraph is very important.
Yes. Any other friends wants to? May I also share some thought on the very question? Ananta bhai?
Yes, please. Yes.
Noam Chomsky's, when you see the interviews on war in Ukraine emphasizes the lack of, he said it is because of the lack of negotiation and diplomacy between Russia and the West. But the response to Putin's invasion has been a measured, a kind of resistance, not hysterical realism, at least not yet. But a valid prediction is that, NATO is preparing a counter-offensive just in the case of Putin fires off a nuke. So, but the question is not just a lack of diplomacy, but we are forgetting the very culture of dialogue. And Orwell, is right when he says that failing to fight the violence means complicancy as an accomplice. So that is also in the same World War II that and also, but we have to also question the generic institutions, like what is the role of UN Security Council for that matter, and
Certainly.
UN
Yes.
General Assembly for that matter, and what is happening in Taiwan. So China,
Yes.
it is not just to think, but we don't have a sufficient violence. Even for that matter, we had a long a kind of moral voice of Gandhi. But do we really endorse Gandhian idea when it comes to international relation? No, certainly not. So, and it was Jayaprakash Narayan who, during this Bangladesh movement, it was Ram Manohar Lohia in Goa liberation movement and Burma movement. They participated, but even the socialist group, they are not endorsing such brilliant ideas or ideologue for that matter.
Yes. So thank you, Randhir. Yes, these are very important thoughts. So I wish to request that I have just arrived in my kind host's house. so so slowly we can move towards conclusion, please, Randhir.
So we can invite Minati Pradhan ji to offer a song of thanks. But
Can I
it was
take 1 or
really
2
very
minutes?
enriching. Sure.
So just to read one poetry, just to start
Please,
with the new
please.
year today. So it will take
Please.
only 1 minute. So just 2 poetries. So just I'll read it I have written that. It is just because. So as the spirit of new year, like, hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
So we should let go all these old pain, I should not say. I mean that on the whatever the negativities we should let go. And the morning of the new year, no, which holds immense spiritual significance. So we should have a rare opportunity to revive our deeper aspiration. So for that, I would like to read 2 poetries. These are old poetries. Most of you have listened to this one. So this is just, the title is Just Because. Just because you had the bitter past of pain, if you only allow to enter miracles came. Just because the time slipped in between your fingers, look around, the coming busy days linger. Just because the problem troubled you, turn them into blessings, may not be all, but surely a few. Just because you did not find solution then, never say never and don't ask when. Just because you received hate, don't forget to love. For that it is the pearl of heart and a treasure trove. Just because for long you experienced the void, today again you will miss the divine if you still avoid. Just because it was yesterday and nothing, we all can transmute into a substantial something. So the next one also is 1 minute, so I'll just read in solitude. The poetry title is Solitude. Solitude, there is an answer only if you ask your soul, the inner being. In absence of noise, you can feel yourself only if you look within. In the maddening crowd, cosmos will reveal only if you allow the lights to come in. In the inner eye, if you look around, there is no imperfect vision. It is only this moment to live and love. Only if you think it is a perfect season. Thank you. And thank you for everybody for listening. And I am boring with my poetry. So,
Thank you. Thank you. And yes, I can also remember one of in New Year poetry by Kate Beer. it goes like this. Look at it, cold and wet like a newborn calf. I want to tell it everything, how we struggled, how we tore out our head and tumbled through rust nail just to stand for its birth. I want to say, look how far we have come, promise our resolutions, but what does a baby care for oaths and pledges? It only wants to live. So thank you so much, and wish you a very happy new year.
Thank you, Minati. Thank you, Randhir. Thank you, Paul. Thank you.